You can hear us? How's my hair? Luscious.
Voluminous.
That's right. Tempo changes, the one and only.
Hello.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
So we're gonna talk about safety first before we get started today.
Okay.
All right. So, as usual in the park, when it gets really busy here, it's a skills park, public skills park here at Duthie Hill, and we see injuries on the weekends. We see injuries quite a bit of the time. And the thing that I've really realized is that injuries are happening in the same places. And it's not because of the trails are misbuilt. It's actually because people aren't really noticing what's happening in real time with them. And so we're going to talk a little bit about tempo changes. And what I mean about tempo changes is the actual change in pitch and the change in speed of the trail.
Okay.
All right. So what happens on a couple of the popular jump runs here is that there are some jumps, like some jumps that are behind us, which we actually have to pedal and work for, and then a jump in front of us, which we actually need to brake for. Mm-hmm. And people kind of think like, oh, I'm going too slow, I'm not going to make the next jump. And then they get to like a big downhill and they're still trying for speed. And they actually over jump something so badly that they over rotate in the air and land upside down.
That doesn't sound good.
It's not good at all. So a lot of injuries to like shoulders, head injuries, things like that. So it can actually be quite serious. So the point of this is that when you're looking at a jump run, one of the things we want to do is not get so hyper-focused on the individual pieces of the jump run, like each individual jump. We actually also want to just look at the lay of the land. Like, is it flat, which I'd call a negative tempo? Is it steep, which I'd call a positive tempo? Or is it just kind of this perfect like trail speed thing, which I call a neutral tempo? So on this run here, we have a nice neutral tempo at the beginning. Then we have kind of a negative tempo where we have to pedal a lot. And then all of a sudden we get these massive positive tempos. Then this is where people get hurt. So a lot of you at home might be, when you're concerned about jumping a jump, you're concerned about under jumping it, especially if it's a gap jump. But what we actually see here in the park is that most injuries actually occur from over jumping. So again, people just get kind of caught up thinking I'm not going fast enough, and all of a sudden they go too fast into a jump. So the thing you want to do when you look at a jump run is not just look at the individual pieces, or you want to do that for sure, but once you've done that, you want to actually just kind of like look at it and just kind of erase all the jumps and all the features on it and think about what does the land actually look like, what is actually going on here, because it's really important to keep this in mind to stay safe. So we're going to take a look at this. We're just going to kind of look at some of the changes here on this run and play around, ride bikes a little bit.
Okay.
All right, let's do it. Here we can see that this is really a negative tempo here. And I'm definitely standing at a higher altitude than Linnea. And the trail's going this direction. So I'm definitely gonna need to pedal here in order to get up the hill and be set up for this first little roller jump. So I'm in this mindset of attempting to gain speed here for this next little terrain piece. Once I've pedaled through here, I'm all set up to jump this little gap here. This used to be a mandatory gap. It's no longer a mandatory gap, which is nice. It means we can roll it and we can actually control our speed. But today we're going to be jumping it because it is part of the trail. Here I'm going to need to be sure that I really get on the brakes a little bit down before I get to where Linnea is standing. We can really see how much this hill drops away. It's suddenly much steeper than any other part of the trail, and the upcoming jump really isn't very big. Basically, where I want to land on this little step-up jump, this isn't a very big jump. It's maybe 6 or 7 feet in terms of the gap itself, and it's decked in. So there's no reason to go too fast into this your first time. But riders are often scared they're not going to clear a jump. And what we see here is people failing to brake check where Linnea is and jumping this and landing all the way up there on the uphill, oftentimes upside down, because they're prepared well for the landing, but then they go too far and they keep rotating. So we get some really serious crashes right up in that zone there. Remember that we also always want to accelerate into a jump. So I'm going to be brake checking way up the hill there where Linnea is, and then letting my bike accelerate into the jump. I really don't want to be using braking forces leading up the jump face, because that's going to lead to imbalanced outcomes. So even though this isn't like a super exciting topic, I mean, it really is one of the most important topics because it's going to keep people safe. And, you know, if you're watching this at home, the thing to remember is that this is on you. This isn't on the trail builders. Trail builders don't control the grade of the land that they're building on. They do their best, but there are going to be places where we need to brake and there are going to be places where we need to pedal. And we really need to be conscious of this and look at the macro view of the trail.
It's so easy to get caught up in just thinking about the jump and every individual jump that you don't notice when the trail starts pitching you downhill and all of a sudden you have this extra speed and you can't jump the next jump the same way you jumped the prior jump.
The other thing that happens is that people just assume that under jumping a jump is like the worst thing you could possibly do. And a lot of these jumps here are decked in, so there's no reason to not go a little bit smaller to start, right? Even if they weren't decked in, being able to pace them off and understand how big they aren't is really important. I mean, again, I see way more people over jumping than under jumping. Another thing I'll say is that people get carried away. Like they start jumping this, they're jumping it well, and they're like, okay, now I'm going to send it. I'm going to make it into a big jump. Well, it's just not a big jump, right? So we want to make sure that we're always aiming to land on the transition. And if we want to go bigger, we find a different jump. All right, well, it's fun jumping HLC line with you this morning.
Yeah, I haven't been here in a long time, so it's fun
been
back.
a long time since I've jumped this line too, so it's good to be back here. Yeah. And we'll meet up again next week.
Yes.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Talk about something.
Yeah, that'll be good.